Pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You whip that off there so fast I can't jump that fast. So 1, 2, 3 and jump.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Nelson.
here.
And Mrs. Sage.
Okay, first on the agenda, we have the audit presentation by Yeo Yeo.
I'm Brian Dixon from Yeo Yeo, and I'm your lead auditor. I'm a partner on your engagement team. In front of you, you do have a copy of the PowerPoint slides, as well as a copy of the audit report, the single audit report, and your governance letter. So we will focus on the PowerPoint slides, and if we have to dig into the other ones with questions or answers, we can do that. So first of all, the audit process consists of 3 parts. We have the financial statements, which are the numbers. We look at those to make sure they're fairly stated. We look at your internal controls, which are your safeguards over the district's assets, as well as your compliance with federal, state, and local laws. When we looked at your financial statements, we did issue an unmodified opinion. Clean opinion, financial statements were fairly presented. We did have 2 emphasis of a matter paragraphs included in those, in that opinion. And that first one is your deficit fund balance, still being a material deficit, as well as adoption of new accounting standards this year. So there were multiple new MASBs that were adopted, so we did include that in there as well. Then we look at your balance sheet of your governmental funds. We have your major fund, which is your general fund, and then the aggregate column for your non-major governmental funds. That includes food service, debt service, and capital projects. At the end of the year, your assets in the general fund, 5.7 million, liabilities of 6.2 million, having a fund deficit at the end of the year of $507,000. Your non-major governmental funds, assets, 431,000, liabilities, 163,000, for a fund balance of 268,000. 235 of that was food service, $9,000 in debt service, and $24,000 in capital projects. Then we look at your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, again broken down by your major fund and your non-major governmental funds. Revenues in the general fund, 6.2 million, expenditures of 15 million, 16.2 million of revenues, 15 million of expenditures, for an increase this year of just under $1.2 million in your fund balance. And that increase was despite the 92 student drop this year. So a very good turnaround for the organization with a decrease in your student count. Again, bringing you back to that $507,000 deficit at the end of the year. Again, we're going to say follow your deficit elimination plan. That will bring you out. I believe the budget for this year is an increase of $456,000, and potentially, if you can cut a few extra expenses or get some more students or revenue in, that would make that budget or deficit go away this year, which would be wonderful. Then the non-major governmental funds, just under 2.6 million in revenue, just over 2.6 million in expenditures, really break even, decrease of $63,000 in those funds, bringing you back to that 268 that I mentioned on the previous slide. So now we focus on your general fund here. This slide gives you your original budget, your final budget, and your actual. So revenues were under budget by 1%, expenditures under budget by 6%, so pretty close on both of those, but you were under budget, which is good in your expenditures. The net change in fund balance, again, this year just under $1.2 million increase in your fund balance, and that was better than you anticipated at the beginning of the year or at your final budget projection. Generally, you amend your budget, once or twice a year, depending on things that change throughout the year. Just follow the budget, Uniform Budget Act. Management prepares the budget, you guys approve it, give the authority back to management to follow, and have expenditures underneath that budget. And then if there are new changes or funding cuts or different things that happen within the district, management would then come back and you can approve a new budget at that point. But just follow those budgeting guidelines that are set out there for you. Then we have your general fund compared to the prior year. And on the top of the slide, we put the overall changes. So revenues did go up 1.2%. Expenditures went up 2.4% compared to the prior year. But again, pretty flat. But if you look at your restricted revenues or expenses, because if you get in a new federal grant, that's a revenue and an expense, so it really just washes out. So if you look at just your, you want to say non-restricted funds or unrestricted funds, you actually had a decrease in revenues and a decrease in expenditures this year, which with 92 students, student count less, you would anticipate that. So again, a slight decrease there. Then we focus on the general fund revenues. 16.2 million in total revenues. You have federal revenues of 13%, state 76%, local is 10%, and then interdistrict and other about 1%, or just under 1%. Total of 86% if you add up state and local. That's property taxes and state aid. And those, as you know, are fixed based on your student counts. That money comes in directly based on student count. So again, fairly consistent with last year. Your state percentage your state money did drop this year, but your federals increased. Again, those restricted grants that I was talking about, those did increase about 3%, but state came down about 3%. Now if we look at your general fund expenditures, 15 million in general fund expenditures this year. Salaries of 43%. Employee benefits, 29%, purchase services, 13%, supplies and materials are 6%, as well as other of 9%. Total salaries and benefits is 72% of your budget, is how that's made up, or percentage of your expenditures. Again, very consistent, how the money came in on the past slide, how the money's going out of the district on the current slide. Very consistent with last year as percentage of total. Then we take your fund balance and compare that as a percentage of your expenditures. You will see here we have a 7-year chart. Back in 2010, you were just above the zero at 3%, and now you're at a negative 3.38% at the end of this year. You will see that you had 6 years in a row now with deficit fund balance, but a good trend. You have 3 years on that trend moving in the right direction. A total change from 2014 over the last 2 years, a $2.5 million increase in that fund balance. Just need to continue that trend moving forward, and you just don't want to slip back and have an additional deficit. So you want to get out of that deficit, get off the state's radar, and then move forward from there and continuing to build that fund balance. Just to give you some benchmarking, at the top of the slide you will see some benchmarking of your peers. 1,500 to 2,000 students is on statewide average would be about 12% fund balance. The statewide average itself of all districts, not just your peers, is 8.1. If we take the Detroit Public Schools out of there because they are such a deficit, that would be 9.9% statewide average. And then MD does recommend about a 15% fund balance. And again, with 15% fund balance, then you don't have to borrow on state aid throughout the summer. That gives you that cash flow that you need to run the district. So, you are, hopefully this year you'll be coming out of deficit, but always want to be looking to continue to build that fund balance and get up to that point where you're not borrowing on state aid, to meet the July and August payrolls. So then we give you a slide here, just your enrollment trends over last year. And as you can see, pretty flat. Couple big changes in 2014. That was the closing of BV School District. So you did have an influx of students there. But then in the current year, the 92 student drop that I mentioned earlier. So that's the numbers. Then we get into your internal controls. And we looked at internal controls over financial reporting. And we had one material weakness and material noncompliance, which was your deficit fund balance. I think we've had that for the past few years now. Again, with that, follow your plan. You will get out of deficit. And we're hoping that it is actually this current fiscal year that you're in. And then we had no significant deficiencies. And then under compliance and internal controls over your major programs, this year's major programs that we tested were Title I, Part A, and then also Title II, which is improving teacher quality. We issued unmodified opinions on those programs. We did have a significant deficiency and a non-compliance for allowable costs and cash management. There we had Title I, under Title I and Title II, items that were purchased. They weren't specifically addressed in the budget. They were allowable items, but because they weren't specifically addressed in your budget, we had to show it as a finding. Generally, the expenditures were allowable under the program, but because the budget line items that they actually list out in your grant budget, in your program budget, those they actually list out specific items that you can purchase, and those were outside those guidelines.
Are there any repercussions associated with that?
I guess, as soon as this is submitted, potentially, they could come back and ask you for those items. In our audit, we just put it as undetermined for the dollar amount because we couldn't actually verify, just the ones we tested. We could tell we're outside the budget, but we didn't test 100%. We just did a sampling. So potentially, but because they are allowable items, I'm guessing that the state isn't going to hold you accountable to the exact line item dollar amount. They usually do, was it a 10% variance in the budget line item?
Dollar-wise, we're finding these are situations like where the consolidated application would say supplies and snacks were purchased, that type of thing. So the dollar amount is really immaterial. It's just a matter of lining it up. So, and there probably weren't enough exceptions for there to be any repercussions from the state ranges.
And then also we had a significant deficiency in non-compliance for eligibility. Again, this was under the Title I program. And the support for your school selection worksheet of where that money was spent was not kept. I think that was due to a transition in that position. Management has, for each of these, management has already put a corrective action plan in place, and that is included on the last page of your single audit report, your compliance audit. So those are items out there and are already hopefully being taken care of. And then finally, we did have one other non-compliance item for allowable costs. This again was under the Title I program, and there we were missing a certification of one of the employees under that program to support their time. And that was about $42,000 of time that was charged to that program that was not supported by the certification. That certification was subsequently signed after we were on site by that teacher. And so again, hopefully no repercussions because it was subsequently signed. So that's your federal compliance audit. And then finally, your governance letter. And the governance letter is broken down into two parts. First part is required communication between the auditors and those charged with governance, which is the board. And that is Appendix 1. Just a couple items that I wanted to point out there. It's a 5 or 6 page document, but I just wanted to point out that we had no audit adjustments this year. So management had all the accounts completely tied out for us. Audit went pretty smoothly to that regard. And then also included in there is accounting standards and regulatory updates. So we do have a couple pages on those new items that are coming down. And the biggest one is GASB 74 and GASB 75, which is the OPEB standard, and that's post-employment benefits other than pension. As you know, last year we implemented the net pension liability, which was a huge liability of the state. This year, or in 2 more years, in 2018, you have to implement the additional liability for the retiree health care. So not only is the pension liability out there, but the statewide retiree health care is going to be out there too. So that will be another liability. It's still pay as you go under the normal, you pay your percentage based on top of payroll, but it will be a liability on the district's books. And then finally, the second part of that letter is your management comments. And these are not findings, not significant deficiencies, not material weaknesses, just areas that we found during the audit engagement we thought management could improve on the operational aspects of the district. And that first one is the maintenance of effort At the state level, or at the ISD level, county level, you did pass maintenance of effort for special education. At your district level, they did not pass, you did not pass maintenance of effort. So we do recommend that you strive to reach that maintenance of effort at the district level. But again, you're okay for the state because you passed on the county level. All of Saginaw County did pass. The next one is private school responses, and that was with your Title I program. You just need to document those responses. So you send letters out to all the private schools asking if they have any students from the district that need services. And though generally, what we found in auditing, they just don't respond if they don't want any money. But we recommend that you document those responses so that we can actually see that. We saw the letters that were sent out. They had, management had copies of those letters that were sent out, but no responses back. So if it's picking up the phone and just giving them a call and documenting the phone conversation on that letter, or if it's calling you and say, hey, can you send that letter back? So just some sort of documentation. And then finally, Title I, the wage allocation between Title I and Title II. We knew the wage was spent in that program, just better documentation, maybe a time study or some sort of documentation on how that was split. And I understand that that's already taken care of because they're just going to charge it to one of the title programs this year. But again, just documentation on how that's split. And then as you can see there, we had 4 prior year management comments. The top 3 were resolved. Kudos to management for taking those seriously and actually resolving them. And then the final one is the maintenance of effort that I already mentioned. Again, just better documentation and meeting it at the local level, not just at the county level. So finally, thank you for having me here tonight. Working with management, again, very helpful, provided us all the information. Their staff, again, was great in getting us that information that we requested. And got the information we needed to complete the audit. Thank you. Any questions?
If you have any immediate questions before you have an opportunity to let your others? Brian, thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks.
I encourage all of you to take time later and actually go through and document some questions. And the first time before I learned a lot from past items.
And if you do have any questions even after this, if you want to accumulate them or send them to me individually or have management send them, we're always willing to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any citizen participation this evening? Any agenda adjustments?
Thanks, good job.
Okay, hearing none, we have our governor's workshop.